Can we have a round of applause for the pioneering OTT platform in India? Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Ajit, for being a part of VidNet, and really appreciate this. And thank you for bringing us the Olympic badminton final. You know, what really happened at Hotstar at that time, when the entire nation was waiting with bated breath whether Sindhu would bring down Marin and get home the gold. What really happened? What are the experiences at the...
It was, I think Anil, you're hinting at, clearly there was a lot of interest in the badminton finals, and we saw that for some of the other events as well, the athletics, some of the events where India was doing well. But to be honest, I think we have seen some of these huge spikes in viewership on Hotstar when there have been big sporting events. I think we have seen big numbers for the World Cup last year, the T20 World Cup this year, IPL, and it was true for the badminton finals as well. I think when we look at the numbers, NBC reported numbers in terms of their total viewers in the US on demand. And just to give you a sense of the scale, I think on Hotstar we have seen numbers in terms of viewers similar to what NBC saw in the US on digital. And I think when you think about the context of Olympics, I think it probably showcases two things. One, when there is something that is big, that's happening, there's an urgency to it. Clearly, I think, you know, all the constraints of data cost, access to data, the patchiness of data, all kind of go away, and people really want to watch that moment live. And second, I think it also kind of probably points to Hotstar having become a bit of a habit for people that instinctively, when something big is happening on sports, people turn to Hotstar as a screen.
Yeah, we were in the office watching it, and I mean, I allowed my team to actually tune in because it's a moment. It's a moment. So thank you for that. I don't mind genuflecting because of that moment. I mean, it was a nation's pride. But enough of that now. Let's. What has the journey been like? The investment has been heavy, right? What has the consumer response been? Let's look at installs. Let's look at active users. If you can throw some numbers, the 21st Century Fox reports that 72 million downloads. So, what has the journey been like?
I think the numbers are large, and I think as one of my good friends here pointed out, Hotstar throws up very large numbers very often. So, the numbers have been large, but I think if I step back and think about it, I think 2 or 3 things have happened. If I sort of dial back and look at sort of the narrative in India 3 years ago, the most dominant narrative was India was not ready for video streaming. I think there was a lot of conversations of how people were going to watch short-form content on a mobile. I think there was a lot of excitement around social media, maybe a bit around audio streaming, but there was very little belief that this country was ready for video streaming. And I think hopefully what we have done in the last year and a half or so, I think is really showcased that it's been a supply issue. That in a country which is very young, where increasingly people are very comfortable looking at the mobile as their primary screen, there's a lot of appetite for engaging with stories, and not stories in a transactional 30-second, 2 minutes way. I think people have a lot of willingness and appetite for engaging with real high-quality stories. And I think that was the bet that we made as Hotstar, that if you create a great consumer experience on a screen relevant to this country, which is a mobile, and if you're able to address a lot of the issues that come with the quality and cost of access to mobile broadband or mobile data, then consumers will embrace you. So I think we have seen fairly large numbers, I think, not just in sports, but across drama and movies. And over the last year and a half, we are seeing that millions of users are coming into Hotstar every day and spending a lot of time. And for me, I think it shows to a lot of these coming together. And if you build if you have both powerful stories to tell, And if you have at the heart of it a great product and engineering technology, then I think consumers here are ready for it. In many ways, I think they're ahead of other markets. I think embracing the mobile as a primary screen and spending so much time, I think India is sort of at the forefront of it. And I think I would attribute a lot of our success to getting the combination of content and product right.
Great. So what are the challenges you've been facing as a first mover OTT player? What are the challenges which are, kind of holding you back and accelerating further?
Yeah, I think in my mind, the only challenge actually has been the cost of data. I see that as the only barrier for hyper growth of Hotstar or even other OTT platforms. The fact is that when you, both relative to income and relative to what people are used to paying for content, the cost of streaming on a mobile is still fairly expensive. And we see that behavior. I mean, I think when people have access to cheap data or Wi-Fi or in limited circumstances now, free data, we're seeing massive watch time. So again, if I step back and think of what we have done as we've really brought together a compelling portfolio of content, whether it's drama or movies or live sports across languages, whether it's Indian content or international content. And we have created, I think, a user experience on a mobile where you can discover content easily and then the quality of the experience is high. Then it fundamentally comes down to how many people have access to high quality broadband in this country and how cheap it is. And the more people come on 4G or broadband and cheaper data is, I think you will see an explosion in watch time.
Great. So what are the key metrics which you could, which you'd like to share? Any of the key metrics in terms of watch time, or is it engagement, or is it active users? Any of the key metrics?
I think, as you mentioned, I think we had a 21st Century Fox sort of public reporting that we have crossed about, I think, 75 million in terms of downloads since we launched. I think the reality is that people are downloading the app. They're coming back to it often. The metric that we have been looking at is watch time, because getting people to download and sample is obviously very important. But their love for the service and their love for the experience shows up in terms of how often they're coming back and how much time they're spending. And on both metrics over the last 18 months, we have seen quite a hockey stick. And again, I think we are focused on making sure that we are improving the experience. A lot of our effort in terms of, as I think when you say investment, I think you're talking about money.
I'm just talking about money, effort, the vision, and everything else.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, I think a lot of the effort and energy in the last year and a half, Anil, has really gone into thinking about, interestingly, one of our challenges is because we have a lot of stories to tell, and crudely, if you kind of put it into drama or movies or sports, I think we have a fairly unique challenge, and there's a lot of conversation about global platforms. But in my mind, we are trying to do something in India that's fairly unique. And let me just explain it, if you'll allow me 2 minutes. Many other OTT platforms in the world have really been built first on the back of movies. And then they kind of moved to TV shows. And then they kind of started moving to current TV shows. One of the companies that 21st Century Fox has invested in, Hulu, for example, is their bread and butter has been current, sort of new TV shows. I think fairly uniquely, Hotstar is bringing together new TV shows, new movie releases, and live sports all on the same platform. And then to be able to do it across 8 languages. So the challenge, I think that the very interesting challenge that we have is with this kind of a portfolio of content that is truly unique. And I think a lot of users in India who have kind of, for whom Hotstar may be their first streaming experience, may not realize how radically sort of ahead of the world we are in terms of bringing that portfolio together. The challenge that we have is how do we make sure that even though we have that wider portfolio, we surface for a single individual user only the content that is relevant to them. And that's not been something that any other platform has had to solve for when they've had a breadth that cuts across such diverse categories as drama, movies, and sports, and then to do it across 8 languages.
Yeah, Netflix has said they will not do live. That's something Ted Sarandos keeps saying, I will not touch live, either sport or news. So, I mean, it's a compliment to you guys that you're trying to, work with such a broad portfolio. I mean, that's it. It's just a compliment to you. And
yeah,
how has it worked out?
And even for others. I mean, I have huge admiration for Netflix as a company, and I imagine just like us, I think all of them will go through a sort of a stage of learning about the Indian consumer and trying to understand what is of value and not value. But at least I think what we have discovered is that live sports is a compelling proposition, and so is local TV shows and movies, so is a Game of Thrones or a Hollywood movie. But again, I think it's not enough just to be able to bring that width and depth of the portfolio of stories that we have. I think it's also important to kind of translate that to every single user, that we surface and we put together the content package that is relevant for that user, and the kind of things that are not relevant for them, they don't see at all on Hotstar.
So basically, you're saying customization of content, but that story will work. Is it working well with advertisers? Are they coming on board, or are they using Hotstar as an ancillary medium along with television, where they're saying, let's bundle, give me a deal on Hotstar, or your sales guys are saying, we'll give you a deal on Hotstar. If you buy television, are you getting my question? So is it selling on its own, or is it being sold along with television? So the customization, the experience, and the customer base that you have?
Good question, Anil. And I think there are 3 or 4 different questions in there, I think. One, when I talk about customization, I think I'm really talking not necessarily of changing the story for Hotstar, but to make sure that a Game of Thrones user gets to discover Game of Thrones easily. Someone who's coming from Malayalam movies is not thrown a Hindi drama, right? So I think it is about making sure that we understand the users more and more. A lot of times based on what they may not be overtly telling us, in terms of what they engage with, what content they see, what content they explore. So being able to surface only the content that is relevant for the user at any given point of time, I think is one solve. I think the second question that you're asking is, what is the behavior in terms of consumption of Hotstar versus television? And in reality, I think it's early enough that we are seeing all kinds of habits. I think we see for a bunch of followers of Hotstar who have great access to mobile broadband or have access to broadband at home, because we are now on Apple TV and Chromecast as well. For a lot of them, Hotstar is increasingly the primary screen. I think for a lot of people, there is a bunch of people for whom data is still a barrier, either in terms of the quality of data or the cost of data, for whom they come in to catch up. And then there's a whole bunch of users in live sports where, I think they instinctively now turn to Hotstar when there's a big sporting moment. So I think it's early enough that we are not trying to, we're not trying to bucket people into any single formula. I think good or bad, I think the ambition that we have with Hotstar is we are trying to build a product that will have followership amongst millions of users. And yet in that context to treat every user in a special way. Sure. And I think that's the balance that we are trying to strike.
And how's the advertising community responding to it? Are they just packaging it with television, or are they buying it separately from television? Is the advertising agency, media planner, brand buying into it? Because that's important, because there's your AWOD play and there's your SWOD play, which is a Hotstar Premium. I'll come to Hotstar Premium. So how are they buying into it?
Yeah, I think if we keep Hotstar Premium on the side first and talk about the ad-supported model, and I think many of you know part of the reason why we wanted to make a lot of content available without a subscription model was recognizing that data is still expensive. So, as far as users are concerned, they're already spending a lot of money to stream video. And that's sort of been the core service for the last 18 months. I think to your question, Anil, on advertisers, I think one, we have been taking the advertiser proposition very distinct from television. And I think just in terms of where the market is and how quickly it's evolving, I think as in any space, I think we know there are agencies and advertisers who completely embrace the power of digital. And there are still others who are open to sort of understanding how digital can add value to them, and especially mobile. But I think we have taken that proposition, disconnected from any sort of a TV proposition. And to your question, yes, advertisers and agencies have, I think, pretty wholeheartedly embraced Hotstar in the last year or so. And if you step back and think about it, and what we hear from brands is really for them, what is tremendously different from what they saw in terms of their spend on digital in the first 6 or 7 years or so is, obviously digital kind of provided from day one or from very early days, the power of addressability and targeting. That you could target only the audiences or users that you were interested in as a brand. You didn't have to talk to a large audience and then kind of hope that the subset that you were interested in kind of got your message. So that, I think, is an obvious advantage. But where they have seen the power of Hotstar, very different from some of the digital mediums that I think they have been familiar with, is we are getting very affluent audiences from urban India at the moment. And obviously because of the fact that people who come to Hotstar watch long-form content. They spend a lot of time staying on the platform, which also means they're spending a lot of money on data. So the first thing I think they're latching onto is they're able to speak to the most affluent 50 or 60 million in this country. So they are talking to people who actually have the ability to spend money, who are transacting on e-commerce, who are flying. That's one. And the second part, which is I think even more powerful for them, is they're finding audiences who are deeply engaged. We are not, the proposition that we are offering advertisers or brands is not do a 5-second pre-roll or do a 10-second pre-roll. Our proposition is you're communicating to users who are deeply engaged in content. They come often, they stay a lot. So when you're communicating to a brand in the context of a very highly engaged audience, I think that's a dramatically different proposition from the digital mediums that they have been familiar with so far. So I think advertisers are embracing that combination of the two, an affluent audience who's deeply engaged, and then of course the table stake is that it's addressable and you can target the audiences that you're interested in at any given moment.
Yeah, there are a lot of content creators here. They've been the originals. Is that something that you're happy with what you've achieved so far? Any regrets? What would you like to do going forward on the original space? Or is just your linear play and your VOD of your existing shows going to continue?
So, I think, and I run the risk of being an outlier on this, especially with very known friends of mine in this audience. I think if I step back and kind of think about originals, one, I would assume that all of us in this room, including content creators, would agree that the power ultimately is in the power to tell a great story. I think if you strip it down in terms of why mobile video is taking off, why OTT platforms are doing well, fundamentally at the core of it is how powerful a story can you tell. So I don't think there is any dispute on that. I think if you look at that, and then you look at, I think, the point that I was making in the beginning, my belief is that if I look at Hotstar in terms of the kind of shows that we have across languages, which is everything from a Game of Thrones to The Night Of in English to Ye Hai Mohabbatein in Hindi, we do have powerful stories, right? The depth and width of our stories, whether it's been a story produced by HBO or produced by a producer for Star Plus, we have a very powerful portfolio of stories. And on top of it, we have a large movie library. We premiere a lot of movies on Hotstar. And then on top of it, we have live sports. So, I feel comfortable that we have a portfolio of stories that's very compelling for the user.
Sure. Do you see brands coming and helping you in this space so that they can help you defray your cost? So you work with the creator, you work with the brand, somewhat what like TF has been doing. Do you see that? Do you see that you going in that direction?
I think it does seem like just like everyone else. If I kind of step back and think about it, I think all of us are trying to get our hands over this monster, which is mobile, on-demand, high-quality video. And just as I think we are trying to solve it from a consumer point of view, from a platform point of view, I think brands and advertisers are also trying to figure out what is the best mechanism for them to reach out to their audiences and tell a great story. And that could be through a 30-second ad, or it could be through content that they want to engage with in a different fashion than they have done in the past. I think there's a lot of scope for experimentation, and I think it's quite exciting to see a lot of brands and advertisers experiment and see what works for them.
One key point that your entire success hinges upon, you said data, but is there any other point that your success hinges upon?
I think we have been pretty militant about I think, defining where the quality is in my mind. Right from day one, I think recognizing that this is a country that still has fairly patchy access to broadband. So we have done a lot to make sure the quality of the streaming is very high. I think, we understood that there was a huge gap in terms of people having access to stories on demand. So I think the one thing that we have been militant about, whether from a content point of view or from a product point of view or from an engineering point of view, is to kind of make sure that what we are building is not just a replica of what something has done, but it's truly a world-class consumer experience that makes sense for the users in India.
What will Hotstar look like 18 months down the line? Do you want to do some predictions?
I think, I would think, some of the same themes that we have been talking about. One, given that we have a pretty compelling portfolio of stories, I would want to make it easier and easier for users to discover what we have and stay engaged. I think second is, as we have done with both Chromecast and Apple TV, making it easier for people to watch it on a large screen for those set of users who prefer that. And I think third, I think as you hinted at, Anil, that we do see that there is a differentiated service that we can offer with Hotstar Premium for people who have affinity to American drama and movies, as well as for us to have the opportunity to bring live sports to that audience. I think we are kind of scaling up the premium proposition as well in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, you and Netflix had a spat on Twitter. What was that all about?
I think one of the things that has happened, in terms of trying to do new things in India, I think we have tried a few original marketing ideas as well. And I think when we saw one of our sort of a competitor that we respect a lot, take on an idea that we had done a year ago, we just wanted to point out to them that it's a year too late.
Fantastic. So you got a little cocky with them, huh? The world's largest. So how did that work out for you?
Sorry, which one?
The world's largest OTT play, Netflix. You got into a slugfest. How did that work out? What did it do? I mean, you got how many mentions? What happened? What was the result?
I don't think we look at it in terms of, what is the mentions. I mean, it's a company that has done tremendous work in shaping on-demand. We kind of look to learn from them. And I think in India, hopefully, I think we have set a template that will allow a lot of the other OTT players to replicate as well.
Great. So, how many players do you think this ecosystem can support, this Indian ecosystem?
I don't know, Anil. I think it's a large country. It seems like there is tremendous growth in terms of people coming onto mobile, people having access to broadband. So I would not kind of measure it in terms of saying there's a certain number. I would say if people create a great experience, solve for the experience on a mobile, make it easier to discover content, and above all have powerful stories to tell, I would imagine that consumers would embrace that like they've embraced Hotstar.
Now, would it be like television? You'll have regional players, you'll have 5 players with the rule of 3, with the top 3 are going to be making money. The first one will make the most money, the second will make less, and the third will make less, and the fourth and fifth will kind of be going around with a begging bowl. So do you see that happening in India?
I don't know, Anil. I mean, I suspect there isn't a formula to it. I think just one thing that I do know is, and again, I think to the specific thing that you mentioned about regional, the fact that we have shows and movies in Tamil and Malayalam and Telugu and Bengali, it does mean that that's not a constraint anymore. I genuinely think it's just about people having access to high quality broadband that is cheap, and and someone like Hotstar making it very easier for them to discover what they are looking for. And I think if we can get that right, I think there's a huge opportunity for explosive growth.
Thanks. Any questions from the audience? You won't get this man very easily. He's constantly on the move. Yeah. And no personal questions, business questions. If you want to pitch for a show, they have a process. Yeah. Identify yourself.
Siraj Syed, I'm a media critic. How are you addressing the bitrate? Because experiences of myself and a lot of other people over the last year or year and a half that we've tried Hotstar have been terribly varied. Will the advent of 4G, etc., give you a big boost? And does the end bitrate that is received here the same?
Basically, are you bitrate responsive in the current environment?
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for the question. I think 2 or 3 things. One, we do have adaptive bit rates on Hotstar, and I think a few months ago we introduced the users to choose the bit rate that they want to stream on, because a lot of people told us, I don't necessarily want to stream at the highest quality that you have because it's very expensive. And people make choices in terms of what they want to use the data for. So we allow users to choose the bitrate as well. I think two observations. I think it's a very valid thing you have raised. One, this has been something that we have tried addressing from the very beginning. I think we have been extremely conscious of the huge variations in bandwidth. And from a technology point of view, we have invested a lot to make sure that you can stream at the highest quality possible for the kind of data that you have access to. And if you look at the reviews on App Store or Play Store, you will see that overwhelmingly users sort of compliment us for doing that. And I think this has been a huge focus area for us. I think the second part, as you rightly pointed out, there's a limit to how much we can do. At some point, it goes up against the laws of physics. When the bit rate falls to 0, it's very unlikely that we can still stream at 1 Mbps. So I think we will keep tuning it to make it easier and easier, as well as allow people to stream high quality at lower data cost. At the same time, I think there is a bit of an onus on the telcos as well to kind of make sure that they're raising the bar in terms of improving the quality of broadband. And I think, to be fair to them, it's been a huge focus for them as well. So I think the combination of people like us tuning our service, the telcos offering better access to mobile broadband, I think that should make the quality even better and more widely available, I think, than has been the case in the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, Kritika Nelson from Lookup Media. Across the world, we're seeing that cord cutting is becoming like a huge thing, right?
Now it's streaming cutting also.
Right. But considering you are in the family of one of the biggest networks, do you see in the future a day when Hotstar becomes bigger than the Star network in general? And how do you think you will face that day?
Let me, I think if I step back and think about it more in terms of, I think your fundamental question is, where will people discover and follow stories? And one of the hypotheses that we had, which is why we kind of created the sort of the proposition that became Hotstar, is if you look at the total time people spend on television today, it still lags the time people spend in markets like North America. And our hypothesis was, and if you look at the data, you will see that a lot of that growth in people watching stories happened on the back of a second and third TV in the same house. And for a bunch of reasons, any kind of projection, it looks like that kind of aggressive second and third TV in the same house was not happening in India in the last 5-10 years. And then on the other hand, we saw this explosive growth in the penetration of smartphones, where people were switching to larger screens that could stream video. Access to data was getting better, cheaper, I think, to the gentleman's question earlier. And therefore, the bet I think that we were really making was the mobile could become the second and third TV. So I think, it's important to, when you talk about TV, to kind of, there are a lot of nuances in there, right? I mean, it is true that a large number of people are comfortable watching long-form content on a mobile screen. However, the television screen and broadcast is still a big part of everyone's life. So I think the way we are solving for it is saying, if we have powerful stories to tell, let's make it easier for people to discover and follow these stories. And whether it shows up on television, whether it shows up on mobile, whether it shows up as on linear broadcast or on demand, it's okay, so long as we have good stories to tell and we are enabling the discovery of content and making it easier for people to follow stories. And then, when it comes to on demand, just the technology is such that I think we can make it easier and easier for people to discover the kind of stories that they want to watch. And for us, as we know more about them, for us to be able to surface stories that we think they will want to watch. So I think there is power in that technology. But fundamentally, I think there's a lot of growth possible. And fundamentally, I think we're just trying to solve for people to make it easier to watch and follow the stories that they want to.
Yeah. One last question, because otherwise my throat will be slit after this.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm Adish from Alt Balaji. So So I have two questions. First is, can you please reveal some numbers of your paid subscription? Some range will be fine. And
You know the answer to that.
and then again, also experience in terms of the paid subscribers, because I assume most of the viewers that you are planning to target may have already viewed those particular series through torrents. And second is, as of now, only 2 payment mechanisms are available on Hotstar. So any particular reason, or you are planning to expand that as well?
Okay. No, all thoughtful questions. I think just let me explain what the premium proposition is, because to your point about torrents. So the way we are conceiving of Hotstar Premium is a combination of international drama and movies, like a Game of Thrones, a Night Of, a Deadpool, for example, will come soon. TV shows at the same time as TV. So far it's been catch-up. Now on Premium it's available at the same time. And then from the India-West Indies T20 series later this weekend, you will have live cricket as well as on Premium. So we have made a conscious choice that we are trying to build a completely differentiated proposition for Premium that is not just limited to international shows and movies. And I think, as you know, we also wanted to create a price point that was compelling enough. I think we wanted people to look at that price point and say, this is so compelling, even for a subset of that proposition, which is international TV shows and movies, we don't even need to torrent, right? So I think that's the proposition that we have been trying. And I think the experience that we have seen with Game of Thrones, and I think you can see this on different outlets where consumers have expressed this, is people have been delighted with the quality of the experience, the fact that it was available at the same time as the US. And a lot of users who have switched to Premium have been telling us, we don't see the need to torrent anymore. Having said that, I do think we have to keep making the pitch to users that this is so easy, the portfolio is so compelling, it should be even easier than people kind of going to torrents like they may have done in the past.
There's a torrent penalty now with Department of Telecommunications. There's a 3-year jail term and there's a 3 lakh fine. Is that going to help you all guys?
anything that kind of makes it less attractive for users to illegally access content, I imagine is good for all of us in this room who are investing in, writing and editing and producing great stories. So I think that's an obvious one. But I think the bar for us is I think what we're trying to do is slightly higher. I think we want to make sure that the proposition is so compelling, the quality is so good, the stories are so powerful that people instinctively kind of start moving towards this as an alternative to everything else. So I think that's what we are trying to do in terms of premium. And I think all that I can tell you, I mean, I think as you can imagine, this may not be the right forum to publicly share numbers on premium. I will whisper that into your ears on another occasion. But I think if I look at the last couple of months or so since premium was launched, it gives me a lot of comfort that when you create a great proposition and you create a compelling price point and you make it easy for people to pay, I think people do embrace it pretty actively. I think the point that you mentioned in terms of the payment mechanisms, we now have credit and debit cards and we enable in-app purchases. It's just, we respond to what people were asking for. We started with credit cards and we found a lot of users who said enable debit cards, and we did that. And I think the objective, and in the next few weeks, not more than that, is to enable all payment mechanisms. I mean, there's no reason to limit it to any mechanism at all. I think people should have the freedom to pay with whatever their chosen mechanism was, what they're comfortable with.
What about collection at the retail end? Will that ever happen?
Again, I mean, I think that question, was hinting at that, right? I mean, and the principle of it is we should make it easier for users to pay for content. And wherever they are, however they want to pay for content is where we should be.
And thank you very much for the interesting session we've had.
Thank you.
A round of applause to Ajit.